how far Kennedy was intending to go in the way of monetary reform.
Wasn't he talking about dissolving the Fed?
Yeah. Well, that's an exception.
That's not true. Well, maybe you should educate us on that, because
Well,
most people think that's why he got his head blown
executive
off.
order, what is it, 11,110,
Right.
is really leads to nothing substantial, and it can't be assumed that any grand thing was to be built upon that. In fact, as a strategy, it's something that I would absolutely recommend against. In other words, if you want to accomplish this, you don't do this in little chicken steps.
Right.
You need to get across all the way across the yard in one jump. Why? Because each chicken step is a further opportunity to cut you off. And to argue for the chicken step is to restrain yourself the full omnipotent arguments for solution. You can't go that way. In effect, we just have to understand that by thinking about it ourselves. The thing is, if we elect a president who will save us, we're sending him into office right now without the backing of a public. And I don't mean, I personally wouldn't even serve as president if I was elected by a slim margin. I wouldn't even think about it. I would hold up my hand. I'd say, I'm sorry, that you all voted for me, because that isn't enough support to do this. You see? So
right.
Suffered another 4 years. The reason is this. We have our sporting events and we play our national anthem and we sing, or the land of the free and the home of the brave. We're not that. We are not the land of the free.
That's war profiteer music.
Yes, it is. But it should be something which should conjure out of us deep honor and
for the founders,
reverence for the
founders,
for those who fought in the Revolutionary War, for those who have fought, even though we armed Hitler in Japan for World War II. Whoever died on the beaches of Normandy should be remembered. Those who have fought to preserve liberty,
what they believed was a good cause.
Yes. However wrongly they were,
misused.
Misused.
Cannon fodder.
Yes, and made me.
My father got shot in Vietnam, 1968.
Yeah. And and all the casualties we make, therefore, by refraining from the responsibility that we all should have. Bravery is not refraining from resisting war. Bravery is standing up against anything that needs to be stood up against, however small or large.
Well, I think that's what you sound that kind of maturity takes years of living to come to. And when I was a young man, I didn't understand the people that objected to the war. Now, after being in war and being around the world a few times, have such a different point of view, and it's so difficult to relay that kind of wisdom to a younger man.
It is, unless my generation is very misunderstood. We said, make love, not war. Well, that wasn't about sex,
Right.
It was about a proper question. I can actually recall profoundly the first time that I remembered a number of white people standing up to defend just the name of a black man.
Martin Luther.
No. That was Muhammad Ali.
Oh, the boxer, yep.
Yes, and it was over the Vietnam War. And we were talking about Muhammad Ali's stance because a friend of mine, I was a junior in high school, there was a piece of lawn between the faculty building and a row of classes, and it was called senior lawn, and you weren't even supposed to set foot on it, but we took it over when we were juniors, and we ate our lunch there, right underneath the dean's window, so that he would hear us what we were talking about. We were talking about the Vietnam War, and a friend of mine, Dave Schrog, had just read a letter. His brother was doing his second tour over there, his oldest brother. And Dave said, he got out his lunch sack and he says, my brother sent a letter and he wanted me to read it to all of you. So he read this letter, and one of the most important part that I recall of it, this is a loving letter from an older brother who's been it's really hard to say this because I wouldn't want to offend anybody in the armed services who's put into this position. But, the real criminality of us as a people is that we're forcing, our armed services to do things which no one should ever have to even experience, much less do.
We're invading and murdering innocent people.
Yeah.
In their own countries.
Yeah. And in the name of liberating them and
telling us that we're defending our own country 10,000 miles away, while our country's overrun with 30 million foreign nationals that have no respect for our country.
Yeah, yeah, and
it's absurd.
And so Dave was reading this letter from his older brother. And he wasn't getting many letters anymore, and you know what happens to a person after they've killed numbers of times and seen things.
You don't get over it.
Yeah.
You never get over it.
And also, you want to protect others from ever having to come there, and you
want it to end.
Yeah, and you recommit yourself, and you don't have the same value for your own life ever afterwards. And we're doing this to our own people, and that's something a decision that we don't even have a right to make, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the horror of it is that we're fulfilling a globalist agenda, resource wars of seizing control and indebting countries, helpless people all over the world. They're the last free people standing up to the bankers.
Yeah, well, the fact of the matter is, just to point out one event, is that we allowed Saddam Hussein to go his merry way because he kept Iraq under control. As the West,
but we armed him.
Yeah, and we armed him, but and we armed him to commit atrocities against the Kurds.
Yes.
We have
chemical weapons.
Yeah, and so nerve gas.
Reagan did it.
and Donald Rumsfeld delivered it with a handshake.
Yep.
So
it's a fact. We armed the Mujahideen when they were fighting the Russian occupation of Afghanistan at $600 million a year through the CIA in Pakistan. And now we're fighting those same people, wiping them out, so we can run the Trans-Afghan pipeline across down to Pakistan. That's all documented.
Kind of looks like that where that's headed. But the more blatant that hasn't culminated in that yet. The one I look back to is with this idea of this obfuscation of the currency. You see things in world events that you would never see otherwise, which are very obvious. But what I'm saying is Saddam Hussein was allowed to be the police state over Iraq, so that Iraq at least wasn't more of a problem than it might have been otherwise, or whatever the damn reasons for it were. But the fact of the matter is, we let him go his way, even in the first, Gulf War.
I was there with Schwarzkopf. That was my first visit to Babylon.
Right. Well, we didn't take him out then, and of course we could have. Now, why?
They had bigger, longer-term plans. That's pretty obvious. Schwarzkopf knew it.
Well, yeah, and probably to his credit, hopefully. I really didn't like to see what Colin Powell did to get this second action going.
Well, he stood up and lied about weapons Scott Ritter.
It was a preposterous presentation that he knew he was lying the whole time he was giving it, is what, I find very difficult about it. But anyway,
the atomic commissions both stood up, including Scott Ritter and the I can't remember his name now, from Sweden. They both stood up and said, "There's nothing there. We've been there. We didn't detect. There's no way."
They were told even after that, and they were asked to be allowed to go in. But here's the whole thing: it's the timing of it. So Hussein had announced that he was going to create an oil bourse. He was going to quit trading oil in dollars. And why? Because he had no more faith in the dollar. He knew that currency was going to pot. Now, if you've got truckloads of them, of course, you'd like to exchange that for some currency that's not going to substantially diminish your wealth. Obviously, he foresaw the failure of the world economies. But the thing is, if that was allowed to happen and everyone divorced from the dollar all of a sudden, it would have had tremendous world ramifications. So that's the timing upon which we invade Iraq to take Hussein out. Now, ostensibly to liberate them, Project Iraqi.
We liberated them, all right.
And so what happens is they argue and argue and argue. The war is not over. It's declared over. It's long from over. And they argue about creating a government. Nobody can agree because there's so much strife over there, especially under these conditions. But what does Iraq get before it even gets a government? It gets a central bank.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
So,
thank you for making that point. That was just thank you.
So,
Central bank.
I wrote the original article on it, and it got blogged elsewhere, but...
maybe you can post it in our site.
Yeah, maybe so. I've got so much work to do. Well, I want to get you the videos that we mentioned and all. The thing about this is the wars, they'll go on. We'll have a war whenever it suits the monetary titans of the world.
Well, the first Gulf War was financed by the Saudi Arabian government. They estimated about $100 billion it cost the United States taxpayer. $60 billion of it was paid by the Saudi Arabian government. It was basically a mercenary action.
The first Gulf War, did you say?
Yes.
Huh. That's a. I had a
good fact to know.
I had a discussion with somebody who his business is intelligence on that one, and I got a little bit different
Tell me.
explanation. Well, we could talk about this for an hour.
Oh yeah, okay.
On that one, and I want to. So we'll have to take that up because
we'll take it up again.
Yeah. The only thing I'd like to leave the listeners with is that. We can only suffer an escalation of this failure. Yes, they're going to pour money into this, but in fact I projected all the methods of what I call artificial sustention to the Reagan administration when I supplied these computer models, because I envisioned all these things as the natural consequences of making my models accountable, for anything and everything that can be done. And the reason I raised these methods of artificial sustention was to prove, likewise, that they had finite possible lifespans, which are of relatively short duration in any practical implementation. So, yet we're about to fail worse than ever before, and we're confronted with a near-term proposition of no candidate to save us. You're listening to the voice of solution here. And
right.
As I say, I wouldn't even serve as president. If this country can't wake up and realize there's one solution that's going to save this country and make it back what it used to be, you can all bend over and kiss your back ends goodbye. I'm not gonna take office to be shot 3 days later or something like that.
You mentioned the violence issue, that you don't want to encourage violence. The people of this country, I don't know about you, but I can feel a pressure building in this country that's palpable. And,
it is. But see, violence won't even serve us. If we had a revolution right now, what would happen is some other usurper who would take over, and we wouldn't have solution. If we wanted to have solution, we'd never have the revolution.